He joins me now on the Western Hotline, part of this Buffalo Bills Football Monday, brought to you by Northwest Bank. For what's next, get started at northwest.com. Well, Chris, we live our lives in the NFL, and I guess we should be less surprised when it happens like this, but beat the Chiefs, lose to the Dolphins, week-to-week league. I know we all know that, but it doesn't really make it much better on a day like today. The Mafia is upset after the performance the Bills put in Miami, which was a dud. It's a low point of the season, I believe.
Yeah, it's a stinker. They laid an egg down there, and I'm just going to give some measure of credit to the defense, which played supremely shorthanded again, and then shortly into the game, even more shorthanded. I mean, they played with three defensive ends for 90% of the game. Daquan Jones played defensive end for the first time since 2021, and then when he did it back then, it was in a 3-4 defense as a 5-tech. You've got your dime defensive back playing nickel, your bench corner playing dime DB. So I just thought the defense battled when they were asked to, after turnovers in particular, and essentially held them to 16 points when the game was still a game. The offense just did not show up.
Yeah.
And look, I think the blueprint, at least teams believe they have a blueprint now, going off Atlanta film, going off Miami film. If you shut down Buffalo's run game and you tackle well, no yards after initial contact, you can slow down the number one offense in football.
Chris Brown joining us here on the Western Hotline. All right, so the defense, let's get to a couple of bright spots. I mean, another couple bright spots here for Cole Bishop and Maxwell Hairston. I do think the secondary is coming together. You mentioned, what they've got going on up front, and even, being down Taron Johnson and Christian Benford. I've got two young guys back there that look pretty good, and if I'm taking anything out of this game that's positive, it's that when the defense does get healthy, I think I'm counting on both Bishop and Hairston to be two of my primary playmakers with this group.
Yeah, I think we all felt last week Cole Bishop had arrived, and then it was, okay, let's make sure that wasn't a one-week thing, and it wasn't. He was inches away from an interception early in that game, making a diving attempt at a short pass by Tua on a slant, and it just escaped his fingertips. And then, Hairston, granted, it's an arm punt by Tua, but you still got to camp yourself out under there, and you got to race Jalen Waddle down the field for the football. He did both, and I think his early signs of high pointing the ball have been excellent. And then you saw a little bit of his return ability after the INT.
Yeah.
So I think those are two bright spots going forward, unquestionably. So I think you got to hope that some other bright spots show up here in the very near future on the defensive side of the ball, hopefully due to improved health.
Yeah, and the offense, we'll see where things go from here. We're waiting for the news on the Dalton Kincaid hamstring injury, which I feel like there's at least enough murmuring that kind of injury is often one that it will at least keep you out for a week. You don't see guys limping off, ruled out with a hamstring injury, coming back right away. If they're down Kincaid, maybe Palmer comes back, but one way or another, whoever they have out there, Chris, they've got to find answers offensively, because right now it looks like they don't have very many.
Yeah, it's troubling on that side of the ball for sure. I think we all have recognized that the passing game largely runs through Kincaid and Shakir. And over the last couple of years, when you do not have one of them, the passing game looks a little more challenging. I think back to the Houston game in Week 5 last year when they didn't have Shakir. And there have been other instances like that where the offense struggles. You hope they find a way with a week's time to overcome that. To your Palmer point, he's very close to returning. He went through a very rigorous workout pregame, which gave indication he wasn't playing yesterday, but it also gives indication that he's very close to getting back. So getting him back in the fold would help make up for the void left by Kincaid. But that's your leading receiver in yardage, and I think Shakir might have the receptions lead, but he was your receiving yardage leader going into yesterday's game. So you got to find a way around that, as every team does that goes through injuries like this.
Chris Brown joining us. Chris, Allen here in postgame talking about how he's got to be better. The troubling stat for, I think, the passing game was 3.53 seconds to throw, the longest since 2018 for him, as when he's dropping back and they get one-dimensional, and something Sean McDermott talks about a lot, they're one-dimensional, and he couldn't find anybody downfield without using every bit of field he possibly could, back and forth. And we've seen that all year long, and I just don't know if if we had the answers, maybe we'd give them to the coaches. But like, what can be done here? The deadline is come and gone, and nobody's coming through that door to help this group other than maybe Gabe Davis off the practice squad. But they're going to have to find somebody. If it's Palmer, if it's anybody, if it's Shakir vertically, which actually we saw a little bit of that in this game, something's got to get going more than 10 yards down the field.
Right, and you have a couple of speed players. Granted, they're not super tall, but Curtis Samuel, I think, is a player that could be used outside a little bit more with, 4.3 speed. Moore is a little tinier in stature, so he's probably better suited for the short to intermediate stuff, and then getting yards after the catch. What you're relying on going forward now is Joe Brady's creativity. You're relying on his brain power to come up with solutions to get this passing game back to a level where opponents have to respect it, to the point where maybe they're not dropping an eighth defender in the box. And maybe the most discouraging thing yesterday was, while Josh had time to throw, there were also several man coverage calls by the Miami defense. So it's man on man, and it's you got to win, and they weren't winning nearly enough. And this is a secondary that, had backups in. Storm Duck, one of their best corners, is on injured reserve. We know Jalen Ramsey got traded away. I mean, it's a secondary of spare parts with Minkah Fitzpatrick. And to not get open and give Josh options on a consistent basis yesterday is a problem. And so without the cavalry coming here past the trade deadline, you're relying on Joe Brady, Aaron Cromer, and the other offensive assistants to use their collective brain power, to use creativity to come up with answers. I've been a proponent of maybe getting the backs more involved in the passing game, similar to what we saw last year.
Yeah.
I mean, they had 70 receptions, 8 receiving touchdowns. I think you can make some hay with that. I'm not saying it's the end-all, be-all solution, but it certainly is something different that you might be able to turn to. It's usually high-efficiency plays with running backs. So I'd be curious to see if they explore that going forward.
Chris, last thing for you here. Understanding that what the Bills kind of put out publicly versus what goes on internally in the locker room, those can often be different, or we don't always get a look inside the locker room. Do you feel like maybe this year we might get, starting now or soon, and maybe it's a little late, more of a feeling of urgency? Because, 6-3 is not bad, but they are really in danger this year, I want to say as much as any other, even though they chased down Miami that one year, of not having a home playoff game. And I think that they are pretty good at being level-headed, not too high, not too low. But at some point, it feels like there should be some snap of like, we got to wake up here. And whether McDermott delivers that message or whoever does, it feels like urgency is something the team could use.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This is the second time where we heard players after the game saying the other team, and I'm quoting Deion Dawkins directly, played harder than us. That's unacceptable in the NFL. And the players admitted that. Like Daquan Jones said, look, we get paid a lot of money to go out there and perform every single week. There is no excuse for not playing as hard or harder than the opponent. But it happened on Monday night in Atlanta. It happened yesterday in Miami against a 2-7 team that's going nowhere. So they have to find a way to recapture that, or you're right, they will be on the road for the playoffs. And, there's a part of me that wonders, too, because I think we also have to remember, and by no means when I say this, am I saying that the Bills aren't capable of stacking wins, ripping off 5 straight, and getting right back into top seed contention. But the Bills and the Chiefs are the only teams in the NFL that have made the playoffs each of the last 6 years. There's a reason why. It's hard to stay at the top, number one, and it's hard to maintain the hunger and stay internally motivated every single week, year over year, in a league where the margins between the best team and the worst team are minimal. And we've seen other examples of that, right? Like Baltimore's missed the playoffs. Granted, one was because Lamar Jackson had a season-ending injury. We've seen San Francisco go to a couple of Super Bowls and then miss the playoffs. It's hard to stay up there and continue to bring the emotional and physical constitution to play top-notch, lights-out football every single week. I'm not using it as an excuse for this team, but it's a fact if you look across the league. The Bills have to recapture that motivation and urgency quickly.
Chris Brown on the Western Hotline. He'll be on the way coming up. One Bills Live today. And then home for the Bucs, which I haven't checked the forecast yet. Maybe I'll do that. Home for a Sunday 1 o'clock game with the Bucs. Right now looks like maybe rainy in the 50s, so not too cold as we got snow on the ground today. Thanks, Chris. We'll be listening for One Bills Live today.
All right, have a good one.
All right, Chris Brown.